I'm Mario Martinez Jr., CEO and founder of Vengreso, and we are the creators of flymessage.io, the free personal writing assistant and text expander application. On each episode of this podcast, you will hear from sales leaders, practitioners, and influencers to help you grow your sales numbers at scale. So, get your pen and paper or iPad and keyboard and start taking notes as you're now listening to the Modern Selling Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Korn Ferry. Korn Ferry integrates their consultancy, Miller Heiman sales methodology, and technology to bring you Korn Ferry Sell for Salesforce and Microsoft Dynamics 365. Learn more at kornferry.com/sales effectiveness. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this episode of the Modern Selling Podcast. And we are back. And this episode, one of my favorite topics is all around methodology and technology. And we're going to be talking about this concept behind what used to be the Miller Heiman Group. For all of you who know Miller Heiman Group, only a 40-year plus iconic legendary brand. And now what Korn Ferry has with Miller Heiman and all the great technology that is intersecting. And hey, what's going on? What happened? Where's Miller Heiman? Where's the IP? Conceptual selling, strategic selling, LAMP, all those things, how we can drive more effectiveness to the sales community. And with me, I've got Christoffer Ellehuus, the president of the digital practice for Korn Ferry, as well as he is the global leader of the Korn Ferry sales effectiveness practice. Christoffer, welcome to the show, buddy.
Thanks, Mario. Really appreciate you having me. Appreciate it.
I'm excited to have you here with us. So just do me a favor. I think everybody knows who Korn Ferry is, but give us a little background about Korn Ferry and tell us a little background about your specific history and how you got to this role.
Absolutely. So, starting with Korn Ferry, I think most people probably have heard about Korn Ferry from the search side, right? The global search company that places all executives. And Korn Ferry still, that's that bread and butter. We still do a lot of that every single day. Actually, fun fact, and just I saw the other day that we place a person in a role every 3 minutes, this company, which is pretty astonishing when you think about it. Every single day, every 3 minutes, we place a person in a role, because we don't just place executives as role. We also do, recruiting at scale. But beyond that, we expanded some years ago into consulting. Korn Ferry acquired a consulting firm called Heiman Group that put a big footprint in around consulting, mainly HR consulting, pay consulting, or consulting, stuff like that. And then the new entity here that we've launched with, which is kind of our third business unit, is KF Digital, where I am, and which we are super excited about. It's essentially our products and IP, our SaaS business. So our SaaS business within a consulting business where we take IP like Miller Heiman Group, other IP, and productize it and sell it as a software as a service. So we're very excited about that. And to your second question, the way I kind of got in, I got in here through one of those acquisitions. So I was the CEO of a training and development company, a $40 million company that was acquired with Korn Ferry just before the iconic big flu pandemic hit the world in 2020. And so I've been on this train with Korn Ferry, building this digital business and really digging in on the sales and service side, which I have a ton of passion for, Mario. So that's kind of how the worlds collided.
Fantastic. Well, as customary, Christoffer, as you know, we always ask all of our guests this question at the beginning of the podcast, and that is, tell us something nobody knows about you, even if they're looking at any or all of your social profiles. And I'm looking for something juicy. Just don't confess any grave sins.
Okay, I won't. Well, the honest, the most open thing would be to say that while I've lived in the U.S. for 20 years, I am actually an American citizen now, but I'm originally hailed from Denmark, and people could not probably hear that in my accent. But maybe the most fun fact is that you really couldn't see, maybe I should make a bigger deal out of this and fun for for this audience you're talking to here. Is that after I finished high school, I wanted to go abroad, and I needed to earn some money, and so I actually started off selling Danish design furniture in all over the world. I traveled to the U.S. and found a Danish design store in Denver, where I sold on the floor selling Danish design furniture, which I wasn't very old, but it was a big hit because you put a good dose of Danish, accent on that, and you sell more furniture. And I went on to do that in Germany and France, and I did that. So fun fact is that for me back then, it was more a way to see the world. But as I got older, this was my introduction to sale. And what better way, I'm sure you've done it yourself, to be on the sales floor selling furniture. This is that's where you learn the trade. And I have so many takeaways back from those days. I was just a kid, pretty much, right? But all the fun facts about selling, reading personalities, creating relationships. I have a lot of lessons learned back from those early days, Mario. So that's maybe not juicy, but that is my fun fact that you can't find anywhere.
Well, the good news is it's definitely not on your LinkedIn profile for selling furniture. I love that. But actually, it's funny going back to the retail days. So I originally started out in retail, and here's a great fun story. I was originally not in sales. I used to be, if you remember a company by the name of Ritz Camera Centers, you used to bring your 35 millimeter film to the little photo booths, and they would print all the pictures out for you. So I used to be a photo finisher, and I worked inside of Ritz Camera Centers. It was a small little, shop that we had in the middle of a giant parking lot out in Concord. And one day I had the regional manager asked to meet with me because I had just put in my application to do a transfer from Concord to Berkeley because I was going to be going to the UC Berkeley. So he came in, and Christopher, he goes, he says, well, I've got good news and I've got bad news. What do you want to hear first? And I said, always the bad news first. And he says, I can't approve your application for the transfer. And immediately my stomach dropped down to the bottom of my feet because I thought, oh my God, I'm paying my own way through college. What am I going to do? And I was like, why? I don't understand. Why can't you approve it? I need this job to be able to pay my way through college. And he says, well, the reason why I can't approve it is because it's for the wrong position. And I said, wrong position? What do you mean by that? He said, well, let me show you something. So he pulled out his books, and he showed that for almost a year long plus standing, I was one of the top 3 sellers every month in the entire region as a part-time photo finisher, meaning I was only working 15 hours to 20 hours a week doing photo finishing. And he says, look at this trend. And then he said to me, I want to know what you're doing. And I said, what do you mean, what am I doing? And he says, what are you doing? And I said, I'm ringing people up at the cash register. And he said, no, let's dig deeper. So anyways, the net of that story was the dig deeper. I told him the whole story of how I go about showing photos to customers, and then showing them all the bad photos first.
Right.
And so when I would print photos, I would organize all the photos with all the bad ones at the top. And then I would pull those out, and they would go, oh, no, that was the race for my son's, track meet, or, I didn't get the motion. And so I would say, oh, okay, well, are you going to continue taking these types of pictures? And they said, yeah. And then I said, likely you have the wrong camera. So what happened is I would show them the bad, and then I would show them how to fix the problem. And so at the end of that discussion, his name was Hunter Anderson. I still remember the guy. He had a big giant toupee. You could always see the bobby pins underneath it. And so then he says to me at the end, he goes, so basically what you're saying is all you're doing is helping a customer. And so I said, yeah, I guess if you think of it that way. So long and short of it, he denied my application to transfer as a photo finisher, but approved my application to transfer as a salesperson. And that's how I got moved into sales. Was from retail, and there's a lot of fundamentals that you learn when talking to people and relating to people.
Absolutely. I find actually most people who are in sales today, happened to get there in some funny way around that. Do you know what I'm saying? Like most people ended up there in that way, I think, which is super interesting.
Yeah, well, I always tell folks if you want to be an amazing salesperson, start out selling in a service-based industry, right?
Yeah,
Because yeah, learning how to deal with people and
yeah,
building relationships,
yeah,
that's key, right? That's
yeah.
the key to the sales. Part of the sales methodology is building trust, building rapport,
Absolutely.
and building that relationship. Well, there you go. That's my little story. Let's get into
Awesome.
some meat and talk about well, first off, you described who Korn Ferry is. Everybody who's listening, if you know anything about the Fortune 100, maybe even 500, is the stat like Christoffer, like 90% of the world's top Fortune 100 executives are placed by Korn Ferry? Is that like, or is that am I blowing it out of proportion?
No, it's probably somewhere around that. The metric I mentioned before that I always found astonishing, just the volume, not just the executive level, but the volume of hires that come in, right? Because we really go all the way from executive hires to professional hires as well. So we hire tons of sales professionals, especially in
Yeah,
this world where there's lots of turnover and stuff like that. So but it's a Korn Ferry now, what do we have, $3 billion company in 50 countries, right? 10,000 employees. So it's grown. It provides an enormous amount of reach, right? And global scale. And the interesting dynamic here that I have personally not experienced before in my earlier part, my career before I joined Korn Ferry is this magic of the access to a lot of decision makers. Once you place them, right, you have a confidential relationship with a lot of those CXOs, right? That provides you an opportunity, right? But you got to be careful because it's a trusted relationship, right?
of
And you
course.
you can't just throw everything in the kitchenware against those people. And so I think that's a very interesting combination of our business. It fascinates me still today.
Without a doubt. Yeah. Well, I think everybody in the industry, if you have been in B2B corporate, you know who Korn Ferry is. And of course,
Right.
I knew who Korn Ferry was. And let's go back into history, maybe about 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, or something around that time. An announcement was made. Korn
Mm-hmm.
Ferry acquires the Miller Heiman Group. What? That made I was like, what?
Right.
What does Korn Ferry want with Miller Heiman Group? And those people who've listened to my podcast for any length of time, first off, you know that Miller Heiman Group and Vengreso, we had a very, very strong partnership and love for each other.
Mm-hmm.
Vengreso's early days, prior to our conversion into a software company with Fly Message, our early days was all about teaching sellers how to be able to prospect
Yeah.
the pre-hello to the hello. And then where the great methodologies like Miller Heiman Group picked up was from the hello to the close.
Exactly.
And so that was a great partnership. In fact, as I think you may know this story, Christopher, the first time Miller Heiman Group had hired an outside sales training company in their 40-year history
Right.
was when they hired Vengreso.
I know. I
Uh,
did hear that.
and Byron Matthews was then the CEO. He was also a guest here on the show,
Yeah.
and I think he was actually with Korn Ferry for a year or two of some
Yeah.
sort.
He was. Yeah.
Yeah. So love the Miller Heiman methodology. You know my story. 21 years
Right.
old, signed a check, went to 5 days. It was the
Right.
best thing I could have ever done. And today we use the Miller Heiman methodology
Yeah.
here at Vengreso.
Yeah.
Korn Ferry buys Miller Heiman, and it's like it seems so out of the blue. So talk a little bit about, hey, why did Korn Ferry acquire Miller Heiman Group?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting thing. So, as you said yourself, Korn Ferry, huge in the HR, people, organizational performance space, and so there was a couple of interesting things about the Miller Heiman Group for Korn Ferry. One was, as you know, most professions today, sales, engineering, is turning into people challenges, right? It's less about the technology, while many are technology business, but what differentiates us, now to come down to it, is the people component. So there was a huge opportunity to say, well, how do we take and add the people lens into all this great methodology and say something about what the best salespeople looks like, help recruit the best salespeople, develop the best salespeople. But secondly, there was also a big opportunity for Korn Ferry, which was big in the HR space, to go adjacent opportunities in CXO? What about going into the sales space, right? And open up new opportunities for addressing the talent expertise with the sales methodology for a sales buyer. So lots of opportunity to go in there. And then I would say, so, new CXO buyer, but also what it provided us is that Korn Ferry, mainly through the search business and consulting business, done a lot of engagement with CXO level buyers, allowed us now also to get things that were relatable for an individual employee. So it allowed us to go deeper into the organization and not just impact a CXO, but also the broader employee base, right? Because that's what all of Miller Heiman Group's methodology is about. It's really about helping the individual seller build pipeline and close deals. So new buyer segment, deeper in the organization, that was really the sidestep that we did. And actually we're looking at now replicating that in other areas like technology, for example, instead. And so that's really been, that was really the play that we made back then that we are still executing on today, Mario.
So Miller Heiman methodology, is it still being used today? And are you still selling that, what we used to know as conceptual selling, strategic selling, LAMP, all those things? Is that still being used within organizations today, or did you only?
Absolutely. So we did, so two things. So all the methodology you mentioned, like blue sheets, green sheets, right? Or gold sheets, all the things of the methodologies you mentioned today. Absolutely. We still deliver probably half of our business is still what you would call traditional training, coaching around the methodology, skills-based training. We've added new things like digital selling skills, since that's become such a big hot things to our repertoire of that. But the other cool thing that we did that is half of our business in this space now is we took the methodology from Miller Heiman Group and we put it on a technology platform that we now call KFSell, that we built natively inside of Salesforce. So, the big problem with training and development, and I've been many years in that industry, was always that, was that you train people and they go back to their desk and they forget everything, right? So training matters when you deliver it at the point of need. So that's really the play that we do here, Mario. We took the methodology, put it on a CRM with KFSell, so a seller can access the methodology when they are in Salesforce updating their opportunities and thinking about how they progress their opportunities to the next stage of the sales funnel. And that, I think, has really, really resonated for a bunch of sellers and sales organizations that we went with. So a lot of our early clients here obviously were people who use methodology for normal training, but are now using it through KFSell in Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics. So we're super excited about that.
Let's go back to prior to the acquisition.
Yeah.
Miller Heiman, along with every other sales training company, including Vengreso's former enterprise sales training.
Yeah.
Biggest challenge and problem we had, everyone in the industry. You throw a bunch of training at them, you get in the room for 2 or 3 days, maybe even 5 days. 70% of everybody turns around and a week later, they've forgotten everything they learned inside of a 2 to 3 day session.
Yeah.
87% of people, they say, forget what they've learned in a month after a 2 to 3 day session. That's according to Gartner. And now you're back to the same old ways. And people oftentimes wonder, well, why didn't this training work? Why is there no improvement in pipeline? Why is there no improvement in the effectiveness of our close? So now Korn Ferry comes in and brings in Korn Ferry Sell. And now, as part of my sales motion, as a seller, move this through the pipeline, I'm actually using the methodology combined with the technology within Salesforce that allows me to be able to see who my buyers are, who I don't know what position my buyers are in, what does my process look like, how much information have I gathered, what challenges do I have, and now I'm answering all these questions as part of the pipeline process that's going to get me to do what? Is it to close the sale better, use the methodology to make sure I grow the pipeline? Like, how exactly is all that integrating together?
Yeah, no, so it's great. So you might remember the old blue sheets. It was on a piece of paper, right? And you would actually literally have to think about that before your opportunity. You would fill it out. You would use it maybe here now it's in there. So when I create my new opportunity, it's just as part of the standard Salesforce platform. We've created a little tab basically. So think of it as a little extra tab that you click inside when you work the opportunity, and it has the same fields that we guide sellers to basically complete by then. So think about the top one single sales objective, like why is the customer interested in buying this thing? What are we trying to solve for them? It could be the other critical things that you might remember from the training, Mario, about buying influences, like who are all the people involved? What are their motives for getting involved, right? Documenting the next step. So, one of the interesting things is, to your point, it forces the seller to think about those things that better manages the opportunity in the moment when they're thinking about entering that opportunity anyway, with all the typical size and stage information you put in Salesforce. How big is the opportunity and all that? What stage is it? All that other stuff. This is the qualitative stuff that actually matters for that thing. And one interesting thing is, for example, we use it ourselves, right, in KFSL. And so I use it with our own sales teams. And one of the things, for example, that's really helpful for me, I've noticed, is that when we do deal reviews with the teams, often half people would show up and they would just start talking. We go into Salesforce, we pull up the blue sheet in Salesforce, and we look at it. And we say, well, tell me about the next steps. Tell me about the buying influences. And it helps, again, the sellers build a muscle about thinking about those things to move it forward, right? And it helps us as a team to collectively work with sales managers, colleagues around deals performance. So, it's the same methodology, it's the same questions, Mario, because frankly, we know from our own data that those are the ones that drive better win rates. We have a year and a half under a belt of KFSL now. And so for the clients who started with it, I've seen a 13% increase in win rates. Actually, a 21% increase in win rates for the ones that had that problem, and a 13% increase in quota attainment for the client. So some really, which is the other benefit of this, is we can collect a whole bunch of data now and actually look at, hey, what's going on? Why are people losing deals? Why are they winning deals? Like, what makes them move forward in stages? What differentiates good sellers from bad sellers? Those kinds of things. So that, again, the methodology is the same, but it's how it's used, to your earlier point, I think, and driven into the sales motion.
Christopher, I recently spent some time with your product team looking at the Korn Ferry cell, the KFSL
Yeah.
integrated solution. And it was interesting. One of the number one barriers that I've always had, I implemented Miller Heiman methodology at my last stop as a VP of sales with our local sales team. And I use it here at Vengreso, and I used it before in my past life at a Fortune 100. And one of the number one barriers that we saw to utilizing the methodology was not that it didn't work, was not that it didn't make you think conceptually and how to build better rapport and all those good things. It was the time it took to fill the data in. It was almost like duplicate entry. And so that was a big barrier for our sales team. What I loved about the integrated solution with Salesforce is that I no longer have an excuse as a salesperson to not think strategically.
Right.
Here's what I mean by that. All of my contacts, either that are in Salesforce or not, are integrated directly into my blue sheets, my green sheets, whatever it might be. All that data is pulled in directly from Salesforce. And now I can easily open that up and see, all right, what are my exposures? What aren't my exposures? Who do I know? Who do I not know? And if I'm looking at a large account where I've got multiple business units, we're looking for those trends of who's engaged with who are my champions, who are my folks that are going to might be my blockers, any of those types of things. And now I can see that. And as a sales leader, as a sales manager, I have the ability to, on an instant, open up the solution and look at what's the situation and what's the landscape look like with my buyer community. And that was a huge barrier, I think, in the old methodology that you guys have solved. Go ahead.
I think that it opens another kind of misconception that when people thought about the old blue sheets, green sheets, the methodology, or any methodology, it doesn't even need to be Miller Heiman Group methodology, it was often seen as an event, right? Okay, I've done a visit, or I'm about preparing a visit. I have to complete all the information that's requested of me in this methodology. I have to know all the buying influences. I have to know the sales objectives, etc. The reality is, as you know, Mario, it's not it's a process. It's not an event. You know certain types of information. Now you have another call, you know more information. You get introduced to another buying influence, you have even more information. So I think what this also does is when it's always live, as part of, just as you go in and update the stage of your opportunity in a normal instance of Salesforce, this allows you to also update all the strategic elements, and you get smarter. You learn more buying influences. You get sharper on the purchasing objective, and so it's more of a process. Do you know what I'm saying? And you're building a process and a muscle around the strategic elements around the deal, as opposed to thinking about as a single stage event that you just have to clarify in that point, basically. And so I think the integration with technology, that's really where this helps, is that it creates a muscle for something you always think about, as opposed to just something you have to complete at a point in time.
You said it. I said it earlier. I described it as part of the sales motion.
Exactly.
Yeah. And integrating that methodology. And in fact, I can't think of another methodology out there. No knock against any of my other friends that have methodologies out there, but I cannot think of another methodology that is integrated as part of the sales motion, meaning I literally must go inside my CRM and I must add the data in, I must add the POCs, and I must identify, track my emails and those types of things. And now I have the ability to be able to take that CRM and make it smarter for me. Smarter, right. It helps me think critically about the deal and the opportunity, whether it be large or small.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to talk about was Korn Ferry Sell has produced a ton of data around traditional sales engagements and how they're less effective today. Talk a little bit about that. Tell us why, and give us some insights into some of this data that you guys have. But before you do that, we want to listen to this message from our program sponsor. Korn Ferry understands talent, and in the sales world, it's no different. Korn Ferry transforms sales teams using their world-class Miller-Heiman methodology, employee assessments, benchmarking, and talent advisory capabilities to increase win rates and quota attainment. Korn Ferry offers Korn Ferry Sell, a sales effectiveness app available in AppExchange and AppSource that helps your sales team develop and replicate powerful sales strategies that help sellers win more deals and crush their quotas. Learn more at kornferry.com/sales effectiveness. That's kornferry.com/sales effectiveness. Okay, right before that break, I asked you a question, and it was talking about some of the data that you guys have, ton of data around sales engagement and how it's less effective today. Tell us a little bit about that and why.
Yeah. So I think it's been fascinating also because the last year and a half too, we've just gone through such a tremendous turbulent time. If you've been a seller, right? I mean, both how you sell, what you sell, how buyers buy has just changed like tremendously, right? So I think there's three things that's really stood out to me. The first thing is that sellers still really struggle with, number one, I think, identifying the true buying objective. Like, why am I talking to this buyer? What problem are they trying to solve? And that might sound a little bit like mom and apple pie. Well, we all kind of know that. The reality is, when times have been good for some time, most sellers still go in and sell a product. They don't go in and listen to a problem and align around a problem. They sell a product. And how many emails do you receive, Mario, that leads with, Mario, I want to talk to you because we have the best thing since, right? I mean, you say you shouldn't do that, but you still 9 out of 10 things you get from sellers are like that today. And we capture that that's some of the KFSell data. We capture that sellers are not good and thorough enough. And that matters because one of the biggest complaints we get in our buyer sentiment survey that we do every year is that buyers say that sellers don't understand their business and their issues. It's their number one complaint about sellers of the data that we get. So that's number one. Number two, I think, is sellers really struggle managing stakeholders, right? I mean, we went from an average about a year ago for having average about 6 buying influencers in a sale. We're closer to 10 now. So the world is becoming more complex. You have to navigate, on average 8 to 10 buying influences. And the most important one, as you know from the methodology that we always point to, is having a coach, having an internal coach in the organization who can help you navigate buying influences. And sellers struggle to do that. They struggle, they pass it over too fast. And it comes back at the end of closing the sale that they haven't figured that out. Suddenly they say, we didn't win it even if they liked it, because they were never talking to the right people. So I think that's a huge third point. And then I would say, the final point is, which I really think will just become a bigger problem over the next set of months with the uncertainty we're seeing now, is that there's so many deals that don't convert. Late stage deals that do not convert. We are finding that up to 50% of late stage deals that we are seeing in KFSL do not convert into actual closed deals. And again, it's not because they are marked as closed lost. It's simply that they keep pushing into the next quarter. This motion, they just keep pushing into the next quarter, or they just vanish. And it's because, buyers are starting to get nervous, especially now, right? Nobody sticks out their career to make a big agreement if the company is facing headwinds, right? It's better and more secure just to do nothing. And that's really the enemy, right? It's doing nothing right now. So buyers really have a hard time making the case for why companies should act. And that's, I think, this second thing. So think about that, 50% of these deals, late stage, that just never convert into things. So I think those are three trends that we're seeing from all this data that I think is fascinating. And I think it signifies the complexity in the selling environment right now.
There's no doubt that we saw that in COVID for sure. Everything pushing.
Yeah.
And we had a deal that pushed well over a year and a half because it was on a quarter by quarter basis.
Yeah.
They were always trying to figure out whether or not they can do it this quarter. Nope, can't do it in next quarter, next quarter.
Yeah.
So this has become a major problem with our sales teams today that are out there. And I think any CRO, CSO, VP of sales, head of sales who's listening to this podcast right now says, yes, this is a major problem. And if we could just close 15% more of that pipeline that is sitting there in that late stage process, I mean, what would that do? So I think it'd be tremendously impactful. How does and everybody knows who's listening in, I never do product pitches here, but I am in love, of course, with the Miller-Heiman methodology. So do me a favor, talk about how the Korn Ferry Sell integrated solution into Salesforce can help a leader and or a team deal with this problem of 50% of late stage deals not converting.
Yeah. So I think as I mentioned before, I mean, there's actually two parts to this problem. If we start with the kind of sales execution play, it goes back to the elements that I mentioned before. Buyers have a couple. I think it's interesting to start with a buyer point of view. But from the buyer's point of view, sellers don't understand their business, and because they feel they don't understand their business, they include them later and later in the sales cycle and in the sales stage. We've actually seen a 10% change over the last year from how many sellers are involved in the early two to three first early stages of a sale. And so sellers get involved later and later, basically. So 80% of buyers have already made up their mind at that point in time that you come in. And it's an evil cycle, right? Because the less value they add, the later you get invited into it. So I think the first thing to really get around this, and then that where the methodology integrated with the technology really helps here, is to add those fundamental questions. Do you understand what problem the buyer is trying to solve? Do you understand their business? I heard this great sales leader who basically asked one question of the only question he always asked when he went into a room of sales managers. He asked them, "How does your client make money? Tell me how your client makes money." And I think it's a great question. Again, it's a simple question, but do you know how many sales people cannot answer that question for the opportunities that they have? I don't have a number on it, Mario, but it is. My guess is it's over 50%. People assume They have a mindset of the product they need to sell. They assume why they need to do it. And it's good to have a point of view. But the clarity around really getting deep in the business of the buyer and what they do, what problem you're trying to solve for them, that's the key thing. But the reality is getting over this hump that we're seeing now where people are pulling back is that you got to return back to fundamentals with the buyer and say, listen, why did you ask to have this conversation in the first place? What is the level of transformation you're trying to do? And what's the cost of not doing anything if you don't did anything right now? So you got to go back and challenge the buyer on the strategic assumptions for spurring action, basically. So I think the methodology really dives in and helps you understand what is that question, what is that need, and who should I have that conversation with? That we as buyers often don't really, or sellers often really don't ask ourselves hard enough questions around. I think is a big part of the challenge right now.
Yeah, and you guys, you talk about two areas the sales team need to be focused on to be successful. One of them is the alignment, and then another one is, I think it's execution. What you just talked about just right now, meaning how does your client make money? What business problem are you trying to solve for your customer? Is that the alignment process that you're talking about?
I'm actually, if that one, I'm actually more talking about that's the execution, because it goes back to the execution, the sales execution, the key questions you need to ask, everything that is in the methodology. That is how we execute on a sale. When we often think about alignment, we think about the people aspect. Well, do you have sellers who are the right seller in the right role, in the right setup in the organization? That's really back to when I talked about why Korn Ferry bought Miller Heiman Group. That's where a lot of 50 years of Korn Ferry expertise into talent and organization really comes to play. We have, I mean, I've just, since I've been here, been amazed about the depth of the knowledge of what we have. We have these over 6,000 of these success profiles that pretty much creates a blueprint for what success looks like in all kinds of levels of different roles, including about 50 sales and account management specific roles. So I think the alignment piece for us is more the challenge of, 90% of the sales organizations that we have surveyed have made some level of change to the people they hire, how they go to market, the products they sell. And that means that they're looking for new people with new skills, but they often don't know exactly what they are looking for, right? So I think really the alignment piece for us is, what kind of people are you hiring with what skills, in what setup, in what org structure, right? That's really for us the alignment piece. The execution piece is what I talked about before. Are you sellers asking the right question, have the right knowledge to move a deal forward in stages and close them?
It's funny. I've talked about this quite a bit, and you talk about not understanding the problem that you're trying to solve for the customer. If you were to take any sales organization of any size, and you would ask one simple question to each of the sellers: what business problem do you solve? Answer that in 1 to 2 sentences at most. You'd get, let's say there's 100 people lined up, you'd get 100 different answers. If there's 1,000 people lined up, you'd get almost 1,000 different answers. There's oftentimes no consistency. And one of the challenges that I've always thrown out to CROs and CSOs that we've worked with is, line up your people, ask them that question, and see what problem you have. Your own sellers immediately go into product pitch, product features, product capabilities, as opposed to what we want to really get to, which is going back to my old retail days with Hunter Anderson. He said to me, so basically you're helping a customer. And that's my famous line: sales is the art of helping. So what are you helping with? And this is one of the fundamental problems, I believe, Christoffer, that people are challenged by. Sales reps are going after anything that has legs. The question is it the right legs that you want? And we want to make sure that before we engage in an opportunity, that we understand that the business pain that we solve is the business pain that the customer has.
Absolutely.
And I think it's interesting how many folks don't know the answer to that question of what business problem you're trying to solve when you're involved in a sales motion. And it's amazing to me that is still a challenge area. Well, so
and that's why I think, Mario, that's why the methodology continues to be, the old Miller Heiman Group methodology continues to be relevant, even when you look at the data, what drivers, because it asks a seller those basic questions, right? And if you don't force the answer to those questions and reflection on them, you get exactly the reactions that you talked about before, right? And I think that is why it's still so relevant.
I'll give you a hallelujah to that, and I'll actually tell you a little story. Recently, I was asked a question of when Vengreso originally came to market as a sales training company, why did we focus in on prospecting and not anything else? And
Yeah,
I said, look, some of these sales methodologies have been out there for 40 plus years. There was nothing new that we could bring to the
right.
market. And the methodologies that we taught back then and 40 years ago, 30, 20, 10, 5, are absolutely 100% still relevant today.
Yeah,
It is fundamentally a problem that we have in the sales organization at being able to answer the question like, what business problem are you trying to solve?
yeah,
So basic,
I
yet
know.
such a complex problem that we have across the sales organization. All right. When sales organizations become focused on the two areas that you mentioned, the alignment piece and the execution, which
Yeah,
now I totally get the Korn Ferry acquisition of Miller Heiman Group. Totally get that, and how you've got this people and you've got the process, and now you're marrying
right.
with technology together, right?
Yeah.
So when organizations become focused on those two areas, the alignment and the execution, what have you seen as the outcome?
I mean, we go back to some of the basic outcomes that people want. Like, there's three that I want to come out that I want to talk about. There's win rate. So I just mentioned it before. One of the big benefits um, we've seen for people who start to really build. Again, it's not an event, right? It's a process and a muscle. When the muscle is getting built, we see up to 21% improvement in win rates, 13% improvement in quota attainment for the sellers who actually really start to use this stuff. And one really other interesting data point that people don't necessarily think about is that we have seen up to an 80% improvement in seller usage of the CRM itself, which is kind of an interesting data point because you know CRMs, right, Mario, was really created mainly for the purpose of the sales leader, right? Because that's where they got data on their opportunity set, so they could do forecasting and they could do pipeline review. But for the individual seller, it often was a little bit unclear. Well, where am I seeing value from entering all this data, right? So by adding KFSell and methodology into the Salesforce, now you've created a tool that is actually helpful for the seller. It's meant for the seller and not for the sales leader or the chief sales officer. So that's why I think CRMs like Salesforce, we have a great partnership with Salesforce, why I think they love it, which is because sellers are starting to use the CRM. They're adopting it like they've never adopted it before because there's value in the words that they have set themselves, Salesforce. It helps simplify the CRM for the seller because the CRM has so many functions and functionality, data, features. This simplifies it down to those basic questions that we talked about before, right? That helps them close deals. So I think those are kind of three data points that I think are kind of interesting. The last one being a little bit more non-obvious, but I think nonetheless interesting in a time when companies spend so much money on sales technology, right? I mean, I saw a data point the other day that on average, organizations in the U.S. spends about $2,000 per seller on sales technology, CRMs, and all kinds of systems, right? And so adoption and ROI becomes a pretty big deal, I think, over time.
Got it. Got it. All right. Few minutes left here on the show. We talked a lot. What can sales leaders do right now that will impact organizational alignment and better execution?
I mean, I think it comes back to leveraging, leveraging those methodology or the key ingredients and questions that are in there, because we're about to hit into an even tougher selling environment where buyers are pulling back, and understanding the business of the buyer, how they make money, all the things we talked about, but applying those questions to sellers in an organized, systematic way that helps build muscle for your sellers to ask the right question, I think is key. I do also think, secondly, on the alignment piece, I do think there's been a ton of change. We're in a more digital selling environment now. Buyers have changed. Buyers have different expectations. They want to buy B2B like they buy B2C, right? They want to open an app and they want to buy it. They don't want all these like boring PowerPoints and all that stuff that they're used to. So what does that mean for skills, right, and capabilities and how we build sales organizations? I do think that that's something on the medium term is really relevant to think into, Mario. Lots of work, but good stuff to do in the coming months here, I think.
I'll tell you a funny quick story. My last one here. As you know, we are converted into a software company using Fly Message, and we are raising a venture round from both private investors, angels, and crowdfunding simultaneously. And recently I met with a investor, and they asked to see our sales pitch deck. And I thought, why do you want a sales pitch deck? So I said, what are you trying to get out of that? They're like, well, I want to understand how you position this and how you sell this. And I thought, that is so 1980s, 1990s. I mean, don't get me wrong. We need supporting documentation in the sales field, and we do have assets that help us with documentation, but conversations should be just that, fluid. Understand the pain. It is so much more complex than here's what I do, here's my data, and here's how we help. Like, it's so much more complex than that. And I just thought, wow, I think I'm dealing with a really old school VC. Probably not the one that I want to be dealing with.
I know.
But at any rate, with that having been said, hey, Christoffer, this was a fabulous conversation. Now I've got the full evolution of, hey, what happened to Miller Heiman Group and where it's at today. I love the fact that you guys are integrating this methodology with the technology and wrapping this together into the sales motion, and love the impact that you guys are making, still continuing to make in the sales community. So this has been absolutely fabulous. 2 questions for you still, and that is, number one, if someone wants to connect with you, what's the best way? Is it Twitter? Is it LinkedIn? Or what's the best way to connect with you?
LinkedIn is always my preferred way. So you can find me on LinkedIn under Christoffer Ellehuus and the Korn Ferry. Write me there. And I'm there to find. I think you can find me on our website as well under our sales effectiveness solutions.
So if you're reaching out to Christoffer, it's Christoffer, and Ellehuus is ELLEHUUS. We'll make sure we put that into the show notes, the LinkedIn profile. But when you reach out to Christoffer, please, sales team, hit that add a note on desktop or personalize the invite on mobot device. Let him know you heard him on the Modern Selling Podcast. For goodness sakes, don't just send a connection request and not know where you heard him at. One last question, buddy, and that is your all-time favorite movie. What is it?
You know, I could probably pop up a couple of like old school Danish movies from my favorite. I'm sure most of you audience would be like, what is that? You know, one movie I just often will watch still is Shawshank Redemption, you know, back from. I love that movie, all the elements of what it had to add, and I love the narrative, the way it's told. I know it seems a bit cheesy, but I love that movie. It's a great movie.
That's okay. We've had it a few times on the show, so you're not alone in that particular request right there. Well, there you have it, guys. Hey, make sure you're listening in right now. Do not turn that dial. We've got this very important message for you from our program sponsor right now. Korn Ferry sales effectiveness solutions are increasing win rates by over 20%. Find out how they can help your sales team. Visit kornferry.com/sales effectiveness. That's kornferry.com/sales effectiveness. Thanks for listening to the Modern Selling Podcast. Please do me a huge favor and give the Modern Selling Podcast a 5-star rating and review on iTunes. Oh, and don't forget, if you'd like to save 20 hours or more in a month and increase your productivity, go right now and download Fly Message, that's flymsg.io, for free. It's your free text expander and personal writing assistant. Hey, thanks for listening in, and until the next episode, good selling.